But without that, you wouldn't have had that and everything else that came after it. It's worth celebrating. And I'll leave it at that. No, actually no, I won't leave it at that. Because I still haven't covered the all-important question. Has this design appeared anywhere else in Doctor Who? Well, the answer is yes, sort of. And that is where I will be going in my next video. No, it isn't. Sorry, that's going to have to wait. We have more pressing concerns. How about we clear up something once and for all? You see, I've continued to shamelessly promote the archive tapes, an audio piece of Doctor Who media which I consider to be the definitive resource if you want to geek out on the Cybermen of classic Doctor Who. It contains all kinds of narrative gems and is brimming with atmosphere. And one of my favourite things about the archive tapes is the way that it reshuffles the Cybermen timeline, so it's told not from the perspective of us the audience, aka the Doctor, but from the Cybermen themselves. This in turn explains why all the Cybermen look different, something that the TV stories failed to acknowledge. But with great knowledge comes great puzzlement, and I am a well-daft chimp. It was going so well. In my Wheel in Space video, I explained how these fellas were officially late Cyber faction, and were actually descendants from these early Cyber faction, who, despite the fact that they were from the invasion which in TV terms hadn't been made until after the Wheel in Space, actually existed first. They in turn, according to the archive tapes, were actually the first divergence of these, the original Cybermen of Mondas. But in uncovering this information, I confused myself, because before all of this, I'd already made a video about the Telosian Cybermen, and in that video I explained how the Telosian Cybermen were the divergence of the divergence. So does this history even make sense? Do these two videos contradict each other? Am I getting too obsessed over something that doesn't even really matter? Well, yeah, probably, but who cares? I almost gave up and defected like an awful traitor over to the parallel evolution theory. The theory that states that wherever there are humans, Cybermen will eventually emerge, as told by Peter Capaldi's Doctor in The Doctor Falls. He then references Mondas, Telos, Planet 14 and even Marinus as examples. No divergence, no proliferation, just different Cybermen happening in different places incidental to one another. Don't get me wrong, I think this is a cool concept, and arguably it's easier to explain a lot of the Cybermen stuff that happens in the world of Doctor Who, but there's just something about the idea that the Cybermen are kind of like a virus. They start on one planet and then spread uncontrollably across the galaxy and then later on in the entire universe, and each time they settle they adapt and evolve in different ways to suit their different circumstances in that particular environment. I mean, the universe is a big place, so of course both theories can be true, and you can also squeeze in your own personal headcanon at the same time. It's all good. And here I go digressing as I always do. Let's get back to the Cybermen of classic stories and figure out once and for all what the definitive David Banks timeline actually is. And in order to do that, I need to go to the source. And by that, I mean the source of the source. Because as good as the archive tapes is, it's really just an audio rendition of this, a book simply titled Doctor Who Cybermen, written by David Banks, illustrated by Andrew Scaletta, introduced by Jerry Davis, published first in 1988, out of print, out of stock for the better part, and, as of April 2023, holy mackerel, I cannot find all the words to quantify how much of a limitless treasure trove this book is. I really can't. Actor behind the mask of the cyber controller from Earthshock onwards, David Banks, geeked out in gloriously dense fashion when writing this, giving us fans everything we could ask for and more. It talks about the history of robots and artificial life in literature in the run-up to Doctor Who, the inspirations that led Jerry Davis and Kit Pedler to create the Cybermen, and how all the iconic Cybermen costumes were conceived, managed, and received in the TV world of Doctor Who. And there's more still. The artwork is just brilliant. I really wish I got my hands on this when I was making the Telos videos. There are some beautiful drawings that fans of the classic stories will recognise, and some other amazing concept art to go with it. Look at these fellas. The shape of Cybermen to come. How's that for a controller? Or should I say, Supreme Cyber Coordinator? Eat your heart out, buses. And of course, the bulk of this book is comprised of the fictional documentation of the Cybermen, from the 10th planet all the way up to Attack of the Cybermen, not Silver Nemesis because that hadn't been made at the time of writing this. You got this comic mapping out the Cybermen timeline in gloriously picturesque fashion, but if even that doesn't make it clear enough, here it is folks, The Proliferation. A guide to the known evolution and activity of Cybermen within the galaxy. The definitive classic Cybermen timeline. And more importantly, an opportunity to see whether or not I made a mistake in my videos. And so it goes like this. Mondas was twinned with planet Earth. Mondas gets knocked out of orbit. Mondasians pursue advanced cybernetics in order to survive. A more militaristic faction of Mondasians split off from Mondas and make a beeline for planet 14, where they turn themselves into a wholly different breed of Cybermen, Cyber Faction. On realising that Mondas has set a course to return to planet Earth, Cyber Faction front an invasion of our planet in the 1970s. See The Invasion. This scruffy little rascal puts a stop to that. Cyber Faction's control ship is destroyed, some of the fleet survives and branches off into two different paths. Meanwhile, in the 1980s, Mondas returns to planet Earth along with the Cyber Mondasians, see the 10th planet. Mondas literally bites off more than it can chew when draining the Earth of energy and blows itself up. The Mondasian Cybermen are... The planet Mondas and their native Cybermen are done and done. However, some of the Cyber Faction left over from the 1970s travel to the far reaches of the galaxy and become the more emotionally eccentric Cyber Nomads. But the ones that stay... Oh, the ones that stay. Here we go. This is what we're interested in. The ones that stay continue to pursue the conquest of Earth. First in the Wheel in space and then in the moon base, not the other way round as most people might think. After these came these, and after these came these, making these, the supposed Cyber-Telosians, the real late Cyber Faction, and these the... later Cyber Faction, even though they came before, according to this timeline. Now I realise why I thought this didn't make sense. It's because it doesn't make sense. How can they be later than the late if they came earlier? Unless it just means later than the early, but not as late as the late. I think maybe David Banks might have got these 2 pointers mixed up, because he's clearly confused himself as much with this as he's confused me more than 30 years later. Do you know what, everyone? I've made a decision. I'm going to go back to calling these guys the Wheelies. And you can too if you like. Fly, internet, fly. Make this a thing, if you haven't done so already. Anyway, we might as well finish this. These aren't called the Cyber-Telosians yet, but they will be. It's just a simple matter of conquering the planet Telos and taking a big old nap there. The Doctor finds them 500 years in the future in the 25th century and promptly seals them up, whilst making a new friend who gives the Cyber Controller a right old bash on the noggin in the process. See Tomb of the Cybermen. Jump quickly back to the 22nd century and the Cyber Nomads are running riot across the galaxy, supposedly creating a bunch of nomadic subspecies that we still know nothing about. That's cool. Away from the planet Earth, a war with humanity is raged, and humans source gold from the planet Voga in order to defeat the Cybermen. The Cyber Nomads lose the war, and in an act of revenge they try and destroy Voga, see Revenge of the Cybermen. However, and supposedly before the war between humans and cyber nomads, one of the races of cyber nomads splits off from the rest and eventually arrive at Telos, just after the Doctor and his pals leave. It's here that they reconstruct the Cyber Controller and the Cyber Telosians to create a brand new Cyberman army, a fusion of both designs, the Cyber Neomorphs, the proclaimed ultimate Cybermen. I wouldn't go that far. A bunch of things sort of happen at once. 3 squadrons of these ultimate Cybermen are time-scooped and forced to play Rassilon's game of death on Gallifrey. See the flipping 5 Doctors. They didn't ask for it, they didn't want it, and they embarrassed themselves in spectacular fashion. So much so that if you ask any cyber neomorph about that thing that happened on Gallifrey, they will promptly change the subject. I promise you they will. Anyway, with humans now spread across the galaxy, the cyber neomorphs attempt to attack the Earth in present-day 26th century. See Earthshock. Not only do they fail, but their ship spirals back in time, thus causing the extinction of the dinosaurs, and an in-depth case study in supreme Doctor Who irony coming in a video that's not this one. Until that point, R.I.P. Adric. With their base of operations firmly planted in Telos, these exuberant Wallies also travel back in time, as if they didn't already figure out the dangers of that, just before the arrival of Mondas way back in the 10th planet, and try to change that whole course of events. See Attack of the Cybermen. Not only do they fail, but their armies on Telos are destroyed. Where this Cybermen book ends, Archive Tapes picks up the ball. Before the Cybermen were destroyed for good on Telos, some of them travelled back in time again and immediately cut themselves off from Telos, thus making them the ISO Neomorphs. Look how shiny they are. At some point during that journey, they supposedly exchanged data with the cyber faction left from the 1970s invasion. And in doing so, apparently they make all of that happen. Time. Am I right, guys? You having that one? Self-fulfilling and that? Feel free to ignore that bit. Anyway, they land on Earth in 1988 and get all mixed up in this thing, the Silver Nemesis. And don't be fooled by that invasion fleet either. Apparently it's all a mirage, except for 3 ships. Probably best to long story short this one. They lose. And as far as classic Doctor Who TV is concerned, the Cybermen are done. And there you have it. Pretty good fun, I think. If you're desperate to make sense of it all, then this is the definitive, if only, guide that you're going to get. But of course, feel free to ignore it and make up your own. The final chapter of the archive tapes actually says that you can do that, so yeah. One way or another, big thanks to David Banks for making all of this happen. So, where was I? Ah yes, wheelies. More on them coming soon. Until then, a quick message. We all know that Doctor Who is the best thing ever, and here are some of the reasons why. William Hartnell stories, Cybermen deep dives, Ibrahim Namin, Laughing at Unit, John Pertwee's Mad Eyes. I know you want more of these things, and there is a way you can help me deliver, because The Chosen Chimp is now on Patreon. For £1 a month you can help me get closer to putting even more time and resources into this channel and providing more content to you, the humble viewer. Time constraints are the only thing that's stopping me from putting more videos out for this channel, and every pound that you donate strengthens the goal of making this the best it can ever be. I just want to stress at this point, and this is very important, there is no obligation whatsoever to donate. But everyone who does, you will just get a big fat thank you from me. From day one, your response to my videos has been the thing that has kept me motivated over the past couple of years, and it will continue to do so, donation or not. Thanks very much to all of you. Visit patreon.com/chosenchimp or follow the link in the description and join me over on Patreon. If you've done so already, then you're a flippin' legend. Thank you, and I look forward to seeing you. In the meantime, this chimp has been chosen for cyber conversion. Have a good one.